Bible smack. Alright, so today we're going to be reacting to Genetically Modified Skeptic on the issue of him saying he's not a humanist-ish. He says he doesn't fit the label of secular humanism because now he's into the Peta stuff. And basically, one thing I've noticed with this guy is that everything's kind of overly prepared. Usually I just kind of shoot from the hip. But it's kind of weird too because like this last video, he's kind of like his hair is growing out a little bit. He's still trying to make everything look just right, but he's like a little off shaven. And like the hair is not growing evenly either. So I don't know because that just looked intentional. It's just kind of weird. But anyhow, he starts off his whole point with the big premise of like, oh, I've been shown the way, that led me out of Christianity because the earth is not special, it's not in the center of the universe, and, what else? Oh, yeah, so basically now we have to change, and we have to change, and we have to change. Keep on changing, but yet we have a intellectually superior blah, 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 blah. But then he starts to realize, well, hold on, if we're not special, then that means that we're not more special than the animals. And, we're just animals. And, it does seem like a leap in logic, but, the problem is that there's a lot of assumption. A lot of assumption, which goes into his area of faith, but he's acting as if these are all facts. The very first thing I want to talk about is the Copernican principle. Now, typically, it was a unified understanding that the Earth was in the center of the universe because the universe is going around the Earth. You see the stars move, you see the moon move, you see the sun move, everything's moving around. And the changes that got involved there became heavily indoctrinated. You learn this stuff from the time you're, I don't know, I was like 5 or 6. Okay. So you have this understanding that you've been given from a time that you cannot criticize it. Now, what actually goes on in real science is not necessarily what goes on in pop science. So this is popular science, and it's very strong, and therefore you can basically, convince people that, okay, well, everything equals this, and therefore we're animals, and now we have to treat animals better. But the first leap in logic is that thing considered, is it a fact that the Earth is spinning and spinning around the sun? Well, if the Earth is spinning and spinning around the sun, then you have to compare it to the rest of the universe. And all of a sudden, we're spinning around the Milky Way galaxy. And then the galaxy is somehow moving. And then they start to come up with a principle called the Copernican principle. Now, Copernicus himself thought that the universe was revolving around the sun instead of the Earth. But that means that the universe had a center in his mind, which it should. If it is a physical object, then there has to be geometry. If there's geometry, you can find the center. So it's like the physical thing is not physical, okay? But if they're running with it, right? And since you're like a little kid taking this stuff, and who are you to question it, right? But, if we get to real science, that's the whole point. The whole point of real science is supposed to be to determine whether or not something is false, Okay, that's the scientific method. Come up with a good idea, okay, then you test it. And you test it again, you test it again. And when do you know it's absolutely true? Well, you really can't. You can just determine the best hypothesis. That's all the scientific method, and therefore science, can really do. But they never actually proved the Earth as doing all these things. And on top of that, okay, even if they did somehow prove that, you get the simple fact that um, if we don't know where the center is, then you can't say something's not the center. Okay, because you don't know where it is. Okay, that's an argument from silence. There's a nice little scripture I just wanted to quote real quick. Proverbs 26:5. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. And, I guess I'll go with an acronym here. GMS. He kind of made his claim to fame saying that he was raised fundamentalist, and then he just drifted away from the faith. And he also thought essential oils are stupid. And he figured that since the essential oils are stupid, therefore, then God doesn't exist. Okay. I don't even know anywhere that like the Bible necessarily says that you have to use some sort of essential oils or whatever. It might give like a little advice, like, take some oil that, help you do this or whatever, but it's kind of more anecdotal. Okay. I mean, the way the advice comes off, it's just, just like the wisdom literature, it just gives you, some basics. It's not making absolute statements. But nevertheless, he just figured that these two have to be related somehow, and therefore God doesn't exist. So, he's like, oh, I'm just so mad at essential oils. And I'm just wondering, like, okay, is there some sort of company? All right. Is there some company that says, we don't want essential oil competition, so we're going to have you go off on these guys? I'm like, okay. But nevertheless, he comes off very crisp. I really have my doubts that if he were, really, because you could watch his videos, and most of them really have him reading off the screen the whole time. Okay. I just learned how to do that. I figure I'll steal from the best or something, right? But no, you want to be able to think on your feet, and I really would like to see if he's ever been in any actual live debates. That would be interesting to me. Nevertheless, so what are his conclusions from this? So far, I mean, I know that like, we've been trained to believe this one thing, and therefore, everything I say is going to sound kind of like, oh no, he's talking crazy, all right? And I'll prove my point in a second, but he's going to tie this all together and then say that we shouldn't be eating meat or meat products, which means that we can't have milk. Okay, it came from an animal, It's like, well, we feed the animals. Maybe the animals shouldn't eat from us, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of these things when we talk about that Copernican principle. You know, um, First of all, here's a guy, and he's not going to be a guy who's like agreeing on me because he's one of the most famous atheist scholars ever, Bertrand Russell. If there was anything to the merit of the Copernican hypothesis, it is not truth, but simplicity in view of the relativity of motion. No question of truth is involved. So, in other words, when we talk about this issue, we're talking about the angle which you look at the universe. Now, he talked about the thin blue dot, which, okay, maybe this is why I should have a script. But Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan made this thing, oh, yeah, we got this picture from Neptune, and we got a thin blue dot. And by the way, when I'm arguing this stuff, I am not arguing for the flat earth theory, okay? Because at that point, then my reasoning would go, well, I don't know if that was really a thin blue dot. But no. We talk about the thin blue dot. All that was is you go away from the Earth so far, and then it looks like a thin blue dot. Well, what I can do is I can close my eyes. And now there is no Earth because I can't see it. All right. Yeah, it's just what do we call that again? It's just an anecdote. Okay, I mean it's all that is. But he's like, okay, we've got an anecdote of this picture of the Earth being small, and therefore we're insignificant. No, it's just that something views you as insignificant. Um, God, however, knows all things, and so He has significance for us all. But you know, let me also bring this down a little further. George Ellis, he's one of the more famous physicists out there. I can construct a spherical symmetrical universe with the Earth at the center, and you cannot disprove it based on observations. You can only exclude it based on philosophical grounds. In my view, there is absolutely nothing wrong in that. What I want to bring into the open is the fact that we are using philosophical criteria in choosing our models. A lot of cosmology tries to hide that. Okay. So, in other words, you're really just imagining the Earth and you're imagining the universe, and they're getting you to imagine your universe in this one way and then making a philosophy from there. Okay. So that's how they hoodwink. That's how they get you. All right. So, Hans Reichenbach. The Copernican conception is indeed simpler, but this does not make it any truer, since the simplicity is descriptive. One description may be simplest for some phenomenon, while a different description may be simplest for others, but no simplest description is distinguished from the descriptions which, with regard to truth. The concept of truth does not apply here, since we are dealing with definitions. Okay. Yeah, let me see if I can find somebody more famous. I got some good guys here, but still. This is Ernest Mach. So you think about the speed the jets go Mach 1, Mach 2. That's from this physicist. Obviously, it matters little if we think of the Earth as turning about on its axis, or if we view it at rest while the fixed stars revolved around it. Geometrically, these are exactly the same case of a relative rotation of the Earth and the fixed stars, with respect to one another. All masses, all velocities, thus all forces are relative. There is no basis for us to decide between relative and absolute motion. If there are still modern authors who, through the Newtonian water bucket arguments, allow themselves to be misled into differentiating between relative and absolute motion, they fail to take into account that the world system has been given to us only once, but the Ptolemaic and Copernican views are only our interpretations, but both equally true. Okay, so the deepest physicists are all saying, look, okay, you're really not proving anything. Okay, we know that this is here. We know that there's a spin, but we don't know if it's the Earth spinning or if it's the universe spinning. Okay, and because this is one of the big principles that he's going to push his whole anti-God thing on. All right, and a Christian can the Scripture, if you're going to argue what it says, it's going to be geocentricity. But it doesn't do it with any type of force. And since it doesn't do it with any type of force, it's not forced upon us to, understand it that way. We don't, we don't have to be concrete and say, okay, it couldn't be, it cannot spin. God doesn't want it to spin. But it just makes more sense that it doesn't spin. Okay. If we look at the scriptures, I mean, when God creates the earth, he doesn't create the sun till day 4, so there's nothing to pull it or manipulate it. And where would it pull it to or manipulate it for? Because there's no galaxies. Okay, so the whole system seems more designed for geocentricity, but it's not a axiom of faith or anything like that. But the world of physics is saying, well, okay, you know, I mean, it's really not arguing with any force against this stuff. It's only the philosophy of naturalism. Okay, so that's what he's trying to do, is push this philosophy of naturalism. And he said, well, then humanity doesn't have any existence, and well, no, it doesn't have any superiority. This is the main point, though. Okay, he says, well, okay, man is an animal. What's that? Okay, that's just your designation. Okay, man is a physical entity. Okay, well, so is this computer. So is this table. They're physical entities. So what? All right, but they're just trying to find some sort of common ground to push their axiom. And so he says, okay, well, man is an animal, therefore we shouldn't treat animals no different. Well, hold on. How do you get morals? Okay, because that's really what's going on here, is that you're trying to say, all right, this shaped my morals, and therefore I shouldn't be concerned with humanity so much as all living creatures, except for plants. um, and one of the big things is suffering. But then they found out that like broccoli has a small, nervous system, and therefore it could feel pain. All right, so if it can feel pain, then aren't you evil for eating a nutritious food? And what does your morals have to do with your nutrition? Okay, he argued about like, essential oils don't work. Okay, well, banning meat doesn't work. Okay, it doesn't make you healthier because you banned meat. I mean, some people try to make that out. And, you can live as a vegan, but you can actually live as a carnivore. All right, you can. God made your body so that you can survive both things. Oops. Yeah, that's right. God made it. Um, so, here's the big foil, though. As he's starting to mull this over, this is his worldview falling apart. Even though he can present it like it's supposed to be true. Yeah. Even though he does a good presentation, his logic is falling apart here. Because he's telling us that we have to take care of the animals, but the animals don't have to take care of us. Why do the animals not have moral superiority? And this will kind of also get into, that Marxist direction. You know, these are greater, these are lesser, but we're the ones who take care of everybody because we're superior. And if you're, less superior, well, then, you need to be taken care of because you can't take care of yourself. Therefore, you cannot be free. And, he does kind of admit that he's like treating people differently as he's treating, different animals differently. Okay. So, this is where it comes back, and you start to hear all these environmental theories about how people are overpopulating and people are the problem. We got to stop people from populating. Therefore, we ought to kill babies and abortion. And, it just goes crazier from there because you say, well, we can't milk a cow because you put the cow in the barn. Well, and you put the cow in the barn, didn't you protect it from the weather? Didn't you feed the cow? All right, so should the cow not like eat anything because of what you did? Should you be eating vegetables? Okay, this is insanity. All right, because you thought there was no center to the universe. Well, if the universe is a physical place, it has to have a center. All right, that's just it. There's other evidences, though. When we talk about that, you have the Michelson-Morley experiment, which it showed that the Earth was not revolving around the sun. Now, a guy named Dayton Miller tested it and tested it and tested it like about 100,000 times. And he didn't want to let go of the ether theory. And it's still around. And in fact, there are many peer-reviewed. I've got this on an article, and I'll post it up. But there are many peer-reviewed articles being made over experiments that showed that there is an ether, but there is not an ether enough to show that the Earth is going around the sun. There's enough ether to show that there is a spin around the Earth. And that was discovered, I believe it was with the Sagnac experiment. I could go down here and look. Let's see here. All right, yeah, so we have the Sagnac experiment, the Michelson-Gale, I think it was the Michelson-Gale experiment. Now, also, there was a Michelson-Morley experiment, which, showed the big problem, and Einstein had to redo physics just to kind of do what he could do to straighten it out. Let's see here. And then Einstein eventually would, let's see here. Yeah, okay. Yeah, Einstein would eventually recant and admit that there is an ether. Here's what he said, and let's see here. He said this in German. The Grundgedanken en Methoden der Relativität des Theorie in here, and I can't do German, all right. Okay, but anyhow, here's what the quote was translated in English. In 1905, I was of the opinion that it was no longer allowed to speak of the ether in physics. This opinion, however, was too radical. As we will see later when we discuss the general theory of relativity, it does remain allowed, as always, to introduce a medium filling all space, and to assume that the electromagnetic fields and matter as well are its states. Once again, empty space appears as endowed with physical properties, no longer as physically empty as seemed to be the case according to special relativity. One can thus say that the ether is resurrected in the general theory of relativity, since in the new theory, metric facts can no longer be separated from true physical facts. The concepts of space and the ether merge together. Now, they kept on trying to make replacements for the ether. And you see that in dark matter, dark energy. There's a lot of dark things. 95% of the universe is, according to this theory, not observed. It's part of this dark stuff. And the irony is that it's ad hoc reasoning. It's just, our theory's not working, so we'll just add this in there. There's no observation of dark matter. So, they do see an effect, but they're just calling it dark matter when it was understood as the ether. So, a lot of the modern cosmology has really started falling apart, and then you're just left with geocentricity. But we're not supposed to admit that, right? And then once you understand that, heck, even NASA, okay? NASA uses a, what was it? These are things I got written down. I just don't have them memorized. But anyhow, they have a method of calculating navigation. And what they do is they start with the idea of, okay, Earth-centered inertial framework. I think that's it, yeah. So with this method, they just calculate everything as if the Earth is still, which is geocentric. And that makes it simpler. But if it's simpler, then it's superior. Okay? Remember, we're dumping geocentricity because it wasn't simpler. But the Earth-centered inertial framework is being used because it's simpler. Right? So, that's where you say, okay, this is the simpler understanding, it's easier understanding. And then when you have that Earth-centered inertial framework, then the Earth is special. And if the Earth is special, what is making it special? All right. And then if the Earth is special, then we're special. Hey, we haven't found any aliens. At least not off the planet Earth. But yeah, so then we're special, and then the whole purpose is ruined. And if we're special, then you should treat us better. And there is a moral to that, as opposed to saying, well, we're going to pick the animals, and then we're going to downgrade the people. Okay. So that's kind of where that gets debunked. But if you are already an atheist and a secular humanist, then you can get confused by these stupid things. Okay. But at least like people using essential oils are doing it to get better. Okay. You're actually saying, well, we shouldn't treat people better. See. All right. Well, I will catch y'all later.